I gotta unmute my speaker. Okay. Welcome into Bible study here. We're picking up with Revelation 17. I'm joined in the room by Jerry and Nola, by Clyde, by Luann and Greg, as well as by Janice and Dave. And I have got two in the waiting room, so I am going to admit them here, admit all, and it is. Okay, it's 3 now. Fantastic. And we are joined online by Sarah McCormick, as well as by Mitch Patry, as well as by Mike, and also Lana is there, so I am letting in a few of the participants. Apologies that I don't have it open to get going. I wanted to make sure you guys were all able to join up even if I didn't have it started, which it's a communion Sunday, so I don't think any one of you are too surprised that it took me this long to get started.
Nope.
Okay.
Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you very well.
Okay, I just got this webcam for my birthday, so I'm still making sure it works.
Yep.
Well, happy birthday.
Yeah, happy birthday. Happy birthday from Clyde and Greg.
Thank you.
Am I seeing Micah there?
Yep.
Yeah, all right. Very good to join you, Micah. All right. So if you would turn in your scriptures here to chapter 17 of Revelation, I will screen share so that you can see what we're up to here. He says, with some hope. All right. Well, we shift to the next section of vision. So last time we finished up with the 7 bowls getting poured out, and now we are moving on in the vision when we get to what is now called chapter 17 here. It appears that Lana stepped away for a moment. I will try to keep an eye. Oh, wait, no, Lana, you're still there. It's just when I screen share. Okay, I see it now. All right, so participants online, you'll have to unmute yourself and shout a little bit in order to get my attention if you need me to stop for your sake there. Participants in real life, you guys are just going to have to shout to get my attention and make sure we get to the bottom of something. Okay, so I obviously have set out the things I want you to learn from chapter 17 here. Let us hear it together. One of the 7 angels who had the 7 bowls came and said to me, "Come, I will show you the punishment of the great prostitute who sits on the many waters." Now, I like to think my question here from verse 1 is a bit of a softball question to get us back into studying Revelation together. What do the many waters represent? I consider it a softball question because we have seen many waters representing stuff already in Revelation. So drawing on those, what do we recall the many waters representing? Clyde's going to take a stab at it. That's close enough. Fantastic. The many different sins we commit. Sinful rebellion of humanity. The many different sins we commit. Absolutely. The seas, the turmoil of the waters, this gets used when the beast, when the dragon calls forth the first beast, I think that was from chapter 13, out of the waters. And what we come to see from that first beast is that it is manipulated human authority. So that beast of human authority coming out of sinful rebellion against God out of the waters, it gets even more solid when we see the Lord enthroned in chapter 4 over a sea of glass, as in sinful rebellion has been calmed. And he now sits over the calmed, tranquil. It's no longer in turmoil. that is repeated again, I'm pretty certain, in chapter 16. So the many waters, here we've got the great prostitute sitting on many waters. There's the great prostitute sitting on the sinful human rebellion. There is a not just a causal and authority thing going on there, but also a result thing. Why is she there? Because, you know, sinful human rebellion kind of puts her there. Likewise, she causes sinful human rebellion. We will get to who is the great prostitute in 2 questions. All right. The comment I would also have you notice is that one of the 7 angels who had one of the 7 bowls came and said to me. So one of these 7 angels, we don't get a lot of, it's not really going to help us very much if we're able to identify, is this the 6th angel or the 7th angel, or is it the 1st angel? One of the 7 angels, they were the ones who were mediating God's wrath on the unbelieving world. And now they get to, this particular one, whichever one it is, it doesn't matter, gets to explain in more detail God's wrath upon the great prostitute. We will answer in a question who it is we're talking about there, but the angel who had mediated the wrath as one of the 7 now gets to say, okay, let me tell you a bit more specifically about the wrath of God upon his enemies. Okay. Let's see. I am going to have to keep note of where I am in my own notes here, but let us move to verse 2 and learn a little bit more there. With her, the kings of the earth committed adultery, and the inhabitants of the earth were intoxicated with the wine of her adulteries. So literally there, what is the great prostitute doing to the kings and the people? Okay, causing their sin. Absolutely, you've got that in the vision. You know, she's committing adultery with them and making them drink from the filth of her adulteries. There, yep, they're intoxicated with the wine. Say it, Mike. Mike, did you mean to chime in?
No.
Nope, gotcha. So to speak a little more on the cause to sin, tempting everybody, she is influencing the governments and the civilizations to rebel against God. You know, that's why you get the kings in particular being mentioned. You know, adultery with the kings. So those who are in charge, she's working on them to join in rebellion against God. The people who are intoxicated by her adulteries, this would be the this would be just then the effect of when the people in charge are being led astray to rebellion against God. The people are affected by that. There is that intoxication, which, if any of you have ever been drunk, you know sometimes it's a pleasurable, giddy kind of feeling, and other times it is a really down, sick, sad, kind of senseless feeling. In any case, you've got the people drunk on what she is doing and this rebellion against God, and sometimes it's giddy, and the experience of it is kind of happy. And other times it is far more wallowing in our own pity, sick to ourselves, and kind of helpless and senseless. But as the great prostitute leads the people in these things, it is in that rebellion against God.
And you get to pay for it the next day.
And absolutely. And that's where we're going to get with the rest of chapter 17 and 18 is, you know, the paying for it the next day. Okay. So who is this in particular? In the vision of Revelation, the great prostitute is the second beast that the dragon calls forth. It's the beast from the earth, which was back in chapter 14. No, 13. Yep. The beast out of the earth in chapter 13, the great prostitute. And we might call this, and I have been calling it, the manipulated religious authority. So if the first beast out of the sea is manipulated human authority, the second beast out of the earth is manipulated religious authority. So this would be the spiritual beast that leads us into false worship, false spirituality. You will notice, well, I'm going to point out to you, this character in the vision is the opposite of the character we were introduced to at the beginning of chapter 12. This is not the first woman whom John has gotten to see seated in a place of what appears to be authority and wonder. Back in chapter 12, he got to see a woman who was clothed with the sun, and her feet were resting on the moon, and she had on a crown of 12 stars. And as that part of the vision went, it became very clear that that woman was representing the people of God. This woman is representing the opposite of that. So if you might try to sum it into one word who the woman from chapter 12 is, we're talking about the church, I would have a harder time trying to summarize who this woman, the great prostitute here in chapter 17 is into one word. But I might say the anti-church, the whatever leading and influencing forces are that would take us away from the church, would take us away from faithfulness to God. Again, she's sitting on many waters. Sinful rebellion, all the sins that we do. Okay. I had told you that she is the second beast, the beast out of the earth, the manipulated religious authority. All titles I'm trying to, give you to hang on to about what John is seeing here. But an interesting point to know about that second beast is that we've already seen it change form once. So when John saw it in chapter 13, shortly thereafter, its function had switched to being known as the false prophet, who was misleading the world to try to worship the first beast. And now we get this great prostitute, and sure enough, once again, the function and goal of this great prostitute is to get people to worship the first beast. So the manipulated religious authority, the second beast from the earth, its activity in Revelation is consistent, trying to get people not to worship God, but to worship ourselves, trying to get people to, in that way, repeat Adam and Eve's sin of taking God's place. And the shifting that happens with the second beast that becomes the false prophet, that now we're going to see is a great prostitute, is different from how the first beast is represented all through Revelation. Manipulated human authority doesn't really change shape in the vision. It's always recognizable as that's government, that's culture, that's human authority. Everybody's got that. I mean, sure, our government's not the same as England's, but we've got a government. They've got a government. Our culture's not the same, but we've all got our culture. But religion, though, spirituality, a bit slipperier, shifting, seeking to lead us away from the Lord. I've got a few comments to make before we get to the next point on the list. So let's get through those as we hear chapter 17, verse 3. Then the angel carried me away in the spirit into a desert, and there I saw a woman sitting on a scarlet beast, that was covered with blasphemous names and had 7 heads and 10 horns. Well, here she is again. There's the great prostitute sitting on that scarlet beast, this time in the desert. And what do we remember about the desert in Scripture? This is where testing happens. Jesus, in his 40 days after he had been baptized, was driven out to the desert, and there he was put to the test. The people of Israel, after passing through the Red Sea and not entering into Canaan according to the promise of the Lord, were sent into the wilderness to wander, to be tested. Now, in the place of testing, the vision shows that she is there to do her nefarious work of misleading people. Further, so there's your wider scriptural understanding of, oh, hey, they're in a desert. What does that possibly mean? Here's another thing about John in particular in this reading, especially taking into mind what he had just seen from the bowls getting poured out. The 6th bowl got poured out, and you heard about the army coming from the east that was going to bring about the cataclysmic end of all things. When John thinks of east, that's where those great armies are going to be coming from in his understanding of the way the world works. So our perspective of how the world works, we're uniquely in our setting. If you say problems to the south, you would immediately go with, okay, Mexico and Latin America below us and the various societal problems that are contained there. You would talk about John here, though, problems in the east, and he would immediately go, yes, that's where Babylon is. That's where the Persians are. That's where the armies that come marching across and destroying everybody come from. So it's just that quick understanding of that's where danger comes from. So now the deserts there, they're right there in the midst of where the trouble is going to come from. The beast that she's sitting on, sure enough, matches the description from the first beast that we had back in chapter 13 that came out of the sea, with its 7 heads and its 10 horns. Once again, making the comment that I just did, manipulated human authorities, they don't really change in the vision. It's that 7-headed beast with the 10 horns. Because once again, those human authorities don't much change, while the religious spiritual authorities, the deceptions it uses, do change. To make that brief comment a little bit longer, you heard me say already, government is still recognizable from one nation to the next, even from the ancient world to the present world. But consider popular religion and how it changes from one nation to the next, and our knowledge of it from our historical records to the present. I mean, in the ancient world, we had to deal more with temples and idols and animal sacrifice and the like, and that's still present in different cultures today. But that's certainly something we are more unfamiliar with here. But those cultures would be very unfamiliar with things like secular atheism, the belief that there is no God. That's not something that is present elsewhere, but we're much more familiar with that since that has developed over the past 150, 200 years. The changing of that spiritual beast from one time period and place to the next. All right. Verse 4. The woman was dressed in purple and scarlet and was glittering with gold, precious stones, and pearls. She held a golden cup in her hand filled with abominable things and the filth of her adultery. Everything about her looks terrific until you finally taste and see what is going on there. Golden cup? What kind of great stuff is in that golden cup? Oh, wait. It is the Our English translations, how did they put it here? The filth of her adulteries, the abominable things. You know, I suppose from that you can get to a pretty clear picture of what this cup is full of. But I'm a little bit interested that you hear the very difficult to take actual description of what that is, because, you know, we've got it nicely translated for us because you don't want to put rude stuff in the pages of your Bible, but it's there. He wrote, akatharta porneas. And we can easily translate it like we did here. You heard the word pornography in there. You could, and akatharta, unclean things. We easily could translate this, but we would be quite rude to do so, but I'm going to do it here, so apologies to your sensitive ears. In that cup are the filthy fluids of her pornographic acts, which that would not be pleasant to have. But everything looks terrific up until that point. Verse 5. This title was written on her forehead. Mystery. What's mystery mean? A person has to join in to find out. That's what the title mystery represents. You don't get to find out until you're all the way in. You don't get to know what's in that cup until you're willing to drink it. That's the shiftiness. The title Babylon the Great, in the first place, Babylon are the ones who destroyed Solomon's temple. So we know we are talking about those who destroy worship of God. And we also recall from just in chapter 14 and verse 16, so not long ago, we are leading up to this point, Solomon's temple. Babylon destroyed Solomon's temple, destroyed the place where you would worship God. And also Babylon has been being mentioned as going to be destroyed a few chapters previous in chapter 14 and then just the one in chapter 16. What is it that she is the mother of prostitutes and the abominations of the earth? I think you're going to not have many problems with this, considering what we have been previously discussing in the last few minutes. She is closely concerned with idolatry and false worship. That's what mother of prostitutes means. God has routinely referred to false worship as prostitution and adultery. So that she is the mother of prostitutes indicates that she is closely connected to false worship. And what about this being the mother of the abominations of the earth? Well, Jesus has referred to the mark of false worship as as what we would say abomination, something that is just totally wrong. So she, as being the mother of those things, is so closely connected to false worship. Stopping mystery, you don't know until you take part. Babylon the Great, stopping the true worship of God, mother of prostitutes and the abomination on the earth. She leads you to false worship. In verse 6, John says, I saw that the woman was drunk with the blood of the saints, the blood of those who bore testimony to Jesus. When I saw her, I was greatly astonished. John is astonished because it appears that she is succeeding. She's drunk with the blood of the saints. Her desire for the death of Christians, for them to be destroyed rather than misled, perfectly happy to sit and entertain everyone else but wants the blood of Christians. And it appears that she's succeeding as she is drunk with the blood of the saints. That's what gets John greatly astonished. My goodness, she's winning. Have we, in our observation of the world around us, common experience where it appears as if the forces of false worship, rebellion against God, are making headway? Mm-hmm.
Democratic Party trying to stop us from worshiping.
Gathering into worship. It appears that they're winning. It's a frightening thing. Hence, with the vision continuing, we get to see more clearly how this is actually going to play out. But as John first gets to get this vision of, or I shouldn't say first, but as he sees it in the early going, whoa, we're losing. The blood of the saints are being drunk, and she is intoxicated with them. Okay, verse 7. Then the angel said to me, why are you astonished? I will explain to you the mystery of the woman and of the beast she rides, which has the 7 heads and the 10 horns. Verse 8. So we get the angel just chiming in. Let me tell you what's going on. Verse 8. The beast which you saw once was, now is not, and will come up out of the abyss and go to his destruction. The inhabitants of the earth, whose names have not been written in the book of life from the creation of the world, will be astonished when they see the beast, because he once was, now is not, and yet will come. As he seeks to explain what is going on with the woman riding on the beast and being drunk on the blood of the saints, he here points out for us when he, in verse 8, points out the beast once was and now is not, and once again will be, but then will go to his destruction. Let's go back to what I said earlier about the first beast. There is an ebb and a flow to manipulated human authority and how much influence it's exerting, yet it is always there. Even in times of anarchy, there is some kind of government in place, even if it's a time of anarchy. So sometimes the authority is rising up to power, and other times you see that authority decreasing in power and influence, only to be replaced by something else. And this ebb and this flow of human authority, of governmental and civil authority, this is going to just keep on coming and going until finally it is destroyed. As we consider, it really did appear, to use some of those historic examples, where's Hitler now? From early 30s until the mid 40s, his star was rising and then collapsed. Stalin had a bit of a longer run, and the Soviet party that he established seemed to have an even longer run. Outlived him for a while, and then collapsed. Genghis Khan, just because I like going to history. His empire went from the Pacific almost to the Atlantic. And now, hundreds of years went, and the Khans were in charge. Then now not. The Roman Empire, many hundreds of years, and now not. I would also point out to us, as humans, we don't know when, but this also means this great social experiment that is the United States Constitution. Going well, hundreds of years. A time will come. Well, when it won't. And then something else. And so on. There is an ebb and a flow. Notice also that this description here of this first beast, the beast that comes from the sea, it said once was, now is not, and will come again. And it repeats that again. In the early going of the description in Revelation, God is described as the one who was, who is, and will be. So once again, you see that the first beast's role in the vision is to try to take God's place, because its description here is so close to the description of God. It once was, now is not, but will be again. Well, that sounds an awful lot like what was said about God, who once was and is and will be. There is something going on. I point this out to you because the work of the evil one upon us, and especially that second beast, and even the first beast, is to mislead us to hope in human authority rather than in God. Okay. Verse 9. After the description, the angel keeps on explaining, this calls for a mind with wisdom. The 7 heads are 7 hills on which the woman sits. What are the 7 hills? In the first place, 7, because that's the number for divine authority, for divine completeness. But so keep that in mind for the 7 hills and the 7 kings. But both Rome and Babylon boasted that they had 7 hills. So as John sees this vision, he is being pointed out, this is where the empire is controlled from. The Roman Empire is controlled from Rome with its 7 hills, just like the Babylonian Empire had been controlled from Babylon with its 7 hills. So the 7 hills is where the empire is controlled from, the seat of the empire. That is what the 7 hills are, the seat of the empire. He also points out in verse 10 here, they are also 7 kings. So not only is the 7 heads of the beast the seat of the empire, but the 7 heads of the beast are also the 7 kings. 5 have fallen, 1 is, the other has not yet come, but when he does come, he must remain for a little while. The 2 meanings for 1 symbol here is the 7 heads are both the 7 hills for the seat of empire and now the 7 kings. Once again, hold on that 7 is the number for divine completeness, and kings because they claim that kind of authority. And many kings claim divine authority. So a king are those who claim authority. So you got the seat of empire and those who claim even divine authority. Those who claim authority, even divine authority. And then he repeats what he had just said in verses 8 and 9, or I'm sorry, in verse 8, when he says, 5 have fallen, 1 is, and the other has not yet come, but when he does come, he must remain for a little while. The ebb and the flow. You can look back and you can see the kings that were, and now you can see the king is now. You can see somebody is going to come after. There is that ebb and flow of the particular kings. But then it gets a little confusing here. But I think we can get it shaped up here in verse 11, because we got 7 kings. Okay, 7 heads, seat of empire, those who claim authority, they come and they go. But now all of a sudden, in verse 11, the beast who once was and is now is not is an 8th king. He belongs to the 7 and is going to his destruction. So the beast, which is that first beast that came out of the sea, manipulated human authority, is the 8th king, even though there's only 7 heads of the beast. Okay? Here's where we get to it though. Because even when the particulars change, the government, some kind of government, human authority, some kind, is in place. Even if it's anarchy, that would be, we got something. Something is going on. There is going to be some kind of human authority in place trying to rebel against God, to be manipulated by the devil, to rebel against God. So what does the 8th king mean? The 8th king is the beast, because human authority is always going to be in place and always be manipulated. And the goal is to rebel against God. We see this over and over again. So we got this beast with its 7 heads, but all of a sudden an 8th gets thrown in there. But again, the 8th just points out that even as those 7 come and go, this manipulated authority will always stay. But then, verse 12, the 10 horns you saw are 10 kings who have not yet received a kingdom, but who for 1 hour will receive authority as kings along with the beast. To which I say, what? I thought the heads were supposed to be kings. What's up with the horns now being kings? In your Bibles, horns, especially in your Hebrew poetry, refer to strength. The horn of the altar, blow those horns, the horn of the bull, these things refer to strength and might. Put that together with 10, your number for completeness in creation, and you have this great strength of us creatures. The great strength and might of us creatures. Of people. And it says they're kings, but they've not yet received a kingdom. So they act like kings, but without the official authority to do so. They have the kind of influence over the government, the influence over the culture, but they aren't in an official position to do so. So as we think about the influencers and the players, they're not heads of state, but, you know, they're serious players in the game of human authority. And yet, what are they still doing here? They are still seeking to lead us to rebel against God, at work to rebel. 1 hour here, it says that they will receive a kingdom, but only for 1 hour, indicates that they come and go much more rapidly. The players, the influencers, they're on the scene, they do their job, then they're off the scene again. All right. There you go, right? Never had an official position, but certainly changed the course of nations. Yeah. I did kind of have more in mind the people who work behind the scenes, who finance stuff, and so on and so forth. You know, I mean, they obviously have an influence, but it was what that is. All right. And that's where we will cut it off. We will come back at verse 13 here and pick it up and come through the end of 17 and start moving into 18. All right, everybody. Have a nice day.
Thank you,
Thank
Pastor.
you. Thanks, Pastor.
You are welcome.